Once upon a time there was a poor, blind old man, and he and his wife had no children. He had had a hard life, but the man never complained. One day Elijah came to him as he was sitting by the river, and Elijah said, "Even though your life has been hard, you never complained. And so God will grant you one wish." The poor man smiled. "What a wish, what a wish. I'm blind, I'm poor, and I'm childless. How will one wish satisfy all my problems? But give me 24 hours, and I'll come back with a wish." So he went home and he told his wife what had happened. She smiled at him and said, "Eat well and sleep soundly, for I know what you should wish." Now think, what would he wish for? Remember the problem. He's blind, he's poor, he's childless. Here's the wish. He came back the next day and he said to Elijah, "I wish to be able to see my children eat off gold plates." The wish was granted, and the man and his wife lived happily for the rest of their days. Pretty smart guy, huh? Well, like many stories in our lives, that's a story that's really out of our time and experience. We don't experience anything like what happens in that story. And as is often asked of me when I talk about stories in various settings, someone will say, "Is that true?" Especially when I tell stories of my childhood or about my relatives. Thank goodness my relatives don't get cable TV in Holden. Well, is the story true? That's a good question, but if it's not exactly true, is there some truth in the story? Which is the way I would prefer to look at it. Because stories have some truth in them, almost all stories. And stories hook us with certain parts of their own being. They hook us with this story, particularly with sadness. An old person, a couple that are childless, perhaps they wanted children, and then they would be sad about that. And it's a story that turns into happiness and prosperity, the storied happy ending which we all like. When my youngest daughter was going through her teenage years, she wouldn't watch any movie that had a sad ending. So as soon as we said, "Well, let's go to the movies and see this or that or the other thing," she'd say, "Does it have a sad ending?" "I'm not going." I always thought that was kind of funny, but actually it was probably a good idea. And also in this story, we get hooked on the idea of the wish. The wish. Every time I see someone buy a lottery ticket, I think, boy, they've got a big wish going behind that somewhere. I wish I could win this because then blah, 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 all these other things would happen. First thing they do would be give a huge pledge to the church. Especially if the minister or priest found out that they won the lottery. Because I wish, those two words open up a whole new world, don't they? You think about it while you're sitting there. I wish, boy, if we had a list of all the wishes in this room, the whole new world would be opened up. My field director at seminary used to say, "Just be careful what you pray for, you may get it." So it is with wishes. Be careful what you wish for. You may get it. Now, the gospel story is also one of these stories of a very different time and experience than our own. Jesus is talking about things that we don't understand. At the time, the church was persecuted. And in fact, people were beaten or thrown out of jobs or whatever if they professed that they were Christian people. And people didn't have free gatherings like we have, or especially not buildings that were named as churches. It wasn't allowed. And the followers of Jesus, you see, were living after the temple had been destroyed. The great temple in Jerusalem had been torn down. And so when Luke writes this and records what he had heard from Jesus, this has already happened. This great temple, which was the hallmark of religious faith in God, was now destroyed and was gone. And for all people, both Christians and Jews, the destruction of the temple was supposed to be a sign that the end of the world was near. And boy, we love signs, don't we? If I could only get a sign from God, then everything would be great. One of the sitcoms, there's a story, the man and woman don't go to church, but they run into the priest in the fish market. I don't know, maybe you saw this. They run into the priest at the fish market, and he recognizes them, and he says, haven't seen you in church lately. And the husband blurts out, well, we'll see you Sunday. And the wife goes, so now, of course, they're committed. They have to go. The wife is very reluctant and must not have much church experience. So they come to a time of prayer, and they're praying, and the man knows what to do, so he kneels down. It's a Catholic church. He kneels down, and he's in a pose of prayer. And she starts looking around. She did pray for something, but, she's kind of done. She says to her husband, I'm done. I'm done now. What do I do? He says, pray for something else. So she thinks of something, and her eyes light up. And just as she stops praying and the service goes on, her beeper goes off. She puts out her beeper, and it's one of those that has a message on it. You got your raise, which is what she prayed for. A sign. It's a sign from God. So now God has promised her this thing that she prayed for. And she got it. This is the sign, right? Got to be religious now. You can't ignore that. If you prayed for it and you got it, God must be smiling on you. People like a sign. Well, in a very negative sense, the sign of the destruction of the temple set everybody off who were Christian people, thinking that we were now near the end. And so when Luke writes this, the people who were the church at that time needed reassurance that Jesus understood what they were going through. The times were very difficult under this persecution. Did Jesus know it was going to be like this? And does God still care about us? Is this happening and God is still caring about us, or has God abandoned us? Now, Jesus, of course, understands suffering and persecution. And Jesus understands what it is to have your life threatened. And so these verses are a reassurance to the church that this God is still with the people. And it's also a way of saying that suffering is, after all, a part of life, and it is a part of the life of faith, even though, no matter how hard we try to avoid it or make it go away. Nobody wants to suffer. Nobody likes suffering, but we all experience it. We all see it. We all see the innocent suffer. And we wonder about it. But we want it to go away. And we don't take it into our lives, and we don't really accept it unless we absolutely have to. We want to get rid of suffering. Yeah, I always think of this when I see a little kid running around in a grocery store or department store, and the kid runs into something and bangs his leg or her leg and falls down crying, and the mother picks the kid up, or the father, and they say what? Oh, you're all right. You're not suffering. It doesn't hurt. It hurts. It really hurts. Well, our quick response to that is indicative, I think, of our whole attitude towards suffering. And also in crisis times, Luke wants to write these verses because in crisis times, Jesus is talking about, don't follow this one who says he knows the way or she knows the way, or don't follow that other one that says he's the Messiah. Because people start to fall away in crisis times. People start to look for other ways out. Because, for one thing, we are angry with God.